Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm talking all about the classical education homeschool style. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, then hit that thumbs up button and stay tuned. Well, for those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Sharia Maurice and I'm a homeschooling mama to 3 kiddos, ages 2, 4, and 6. And I like sharing videos on how you can simplify your homeschool to save you time, money, and your sanity. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, then be sure and hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell icon so that you can be notified of my latest videos. And if you'd like to get a behind the scenes look at our homeschool, you can follow us over on Instagram at the Sharia Maurice. So this video is actually a collaboration with Davine from Calm in the Chaos Homeschool. She had the brilliant idea to put together a kind of resource for you to be able to learn about all the different homeschool styles out there. And so, like I said, today I'm going to be talking about the classical style of homeschooling, but there are so many others. Davine's going to be talking about Charlotte Mason style homeschooling. There's going to be unit studies. There's going to be traditional homeschool. So there's a great resource for you in this playlist. So I'm going to leave that playlist link down in the description box below for you. And when you're done watching this video, you can go check out all the other homeschoolers talking about their specific homeschool style. So the first thing you need to know about the classical educational model is that it goes way back in history. I mean, we're talking about the Greeks and Romans, and the classical period is from like 600 BC to I think like AD 476, I think, if I'm getting my timeline correct. So we're talking that far back in history is when the emphasis of grammar, literature, logic and rhetoric, those things were emphasized as being something to study in education. But it wasn't actually in the classical period in history that what we know or understand as the classical educational model today. That actually came from the Middle Ages. So the Middle Ages is what is credited to coining the term trivium and quadrivium. And so for those of you who don't know what the trivium is, it's basically grammar, logic, and rhetoric, 3 ways, trivium. And those are the subjects that are specifically studied in classical education. And so that was kind of codified and put together into a systematic curriculum that we understand today from the Middle Ages. So even what we understand as the classical educational model goes as far back as the Middle Ages, but it started in the classical period. So I mean, it is an old way of education, and it is not only old as in old and done for and no longer works. It's old as in it's classic and it works, and it has continued to prove effective over time in history up until this point today. In fact, it was the major way that most people were educated up until the 1800s. In the 1800s, I believe, is when it slowly started to lose popularity, I guess. And it kind of, other things started replacing it. But actually it wasn't until the 1900s, and specifically 1950, that progressive ways of educating children sort of took over the classical model and shoved it out altogether. And you are looking at a student of the progressive model, and I can tell you that it has not been effective for me. I'm reclaiming my education as I am home educating my children, but that was only made aware to me after the fact, and looking back and researching into the different homeschool styles and all that I discovered that for myself. So you should know, first of all, that classical education is very historical. It's got its basis in history, and it's proven effective for a long period of time, hence the classical component to classical education. Now, let's talk about specifically what the curriculum is. I mentioned the trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, or the three ways. Trivium is Latin for the three ways. And so these are emphasized subjects because these subjects teach children or any student of the trivium how to learn. And so how does this work? Okay, first of all, in the grammar stage, which is usually aligned to the elementary ages, when you start memorizing facts and fundamentals of every subject, really. It's not just grammar for the English language, let's say. It's grammar for all subjects. So what grammar means is that all you're doing is breaking down a subject to its fundamental parts. So let's take anatomy, for instance. For anatomy, if you're studying anatomy, you will memorize each specific part of the human body. And you'll do that through song, through chants, through mnemonic devices, any kind of way. Because at this point in a child's brain development, they can pick up new stuff very quickly and memorize it. That's why we start, even when we're teaching our kids English, we start with the alphabet. They don't understand that when you put C, A, and T together, it makes the word cat. But they can recite the alphabet A through Z. And so, and they pick this up quickly and through song and chants and all of those things, because that's the way their brain best functions right now. So we're teaching them, we're teaching them when they want to be taught certain things. So in the grammar stage, it's all about breaking down each subject into its fundamental properties and memorizing those things. So like for anatomy, I said you would study and memorize each specific part of the human body. Then after grammar stage comes the logic stage. And this is where you take that information that you've memorized and you study the components together and how they interact. And so, for example, going on the anatomy example, you would know that you have a muscular system and a skeletal system because you've memorized the specific muscles and the specific bones. But now you're going to study in the logic stage how those two systems interact, and you will understand that based on that foundation of knowing those specific parts, those specific muscles. Well, how does the muscle interact with the bone? Then you kind of put those together, because in the logic stage, usually in the middle school time period in a child's life, is when they start looking at and connecting the things that they have learned or that they have obtained and putting it into relationship with other things that they've learned. So that is the logic stage. And then from there you move up to the rhetoric stage. And this is usually aligned with the high school years. And rhetoric is the ability to speak and communicate and argue persuasively and effectively. So at this point, when we're talking about anatomy, on the grammar stage, we've memorized all of the parts of the body and all of the systems. The logic stage, we have then put those systems together and understand how everything interrelates. We've studied those relationships. And at that point, we were then able to extrapolate certain principles based on that understanding of those relationships and how those subjects interrelate. And then in the rhetoric stage, you combine all of that information and you speak it or argue it, or you say, for example, well, the bone moves the muscle and here's why. And so then you can argue effectively for your position based on all of the knowledge that you've gathered up into that point. And you are able to speak it clearly and effectively and persuasively. And so that is the rhetoric stage. And so all of these, the three stages, the grammar stage, the logic stage, and the rhetoric stage, all interrelate. but it's the focus on each of those stages at certain times in a child's life that is the key to the classical educational model. So like I said, for the grammar stage in elementary years, they're memorizing stuff. Now in the logic stage, they're also reviewing that material that they've memorized, but they're also asking questions and understanding the relationship between all of that. And then in the rhetoric stage, they're still asking questions and they're still reviewing and memorizing that information, but they're also transmitting it and arguing it out to others to help others understand and to also solidify their own understanding as well. So all of those three ways interrelate in the classical educational model. It's just the time in which we focus on them changes with the child and where they're at in their personal development, if that makes sense. So that is the classical educational model, and that is how homeschoolers today theoretically apply the classical educational model to their children. They look at where they're at in their developmental process, if they're at, the grammar stage or the logic stage or the rhetoric stage, and they approach their children with information based on that understanding. And so also another subject that is often included in the classical educational model is Latin, the study of Latin. And the study of Latin is actually a very important component to the classical model because Latin is the mother tongue of so many languages. And when you study Latin, this is really cool. I only learned about this in my own research of all of the different homeschool styles and educational models and stuff like that. But Latin, if you teach your children Latin, first of all, it's easier for them to understand their own English language if your first language is English, because so much of what we get in English comes from Latin. That's why it's called the mother tongue. The word verb was a Latin word created to help you understand a verb or the Latin grammar. So that applies to the English language because that's where we get our own grammar from, the mother tongue Latin. So when you study Latin, you're learning more about your own language. And then when you lay the foundation for that, since Latin is the mother tongue, it helps you to then pick up other languages more quickly because it's the mother tongue of so many other languages, especially what's considered the Romance languages, and that's Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian. That's 6 different languages that you can quickly pick up after you've already learned or after you've already studied Latin. So what a leg up we will give our children if we teach them or learn alongside them, like myself, Latin. And then they'll be able to, knowing so many languages is just so important because then you can communicate clearly and effectively with other people of different language and even read their works and stuff in a different language. And then you can just apply that in so many different ways. It's such a great skill to be able to speak more than one language. My husband speaks Spanish fluently and I'm so jealous of him. So I'm trying to catch up and learn from him and learn Latin as well. I've got Spanish and Latin on my sites for studying because I want to be able to have that skill and to be able to communicate. And we learn better when we are younger, especially whenever we apply the classical model principles of how to learn through grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And then we can take that out with us and it will help open the doors for so many things. So Latin is a very important subject in the classical model. So I think that is all there is to it. Essentially, in a nutshell, classical education is teaching your child how to learn on their own. When they are shown over time how to break things down into their fundamental parts, memorize them, study them through chant, through song, through all of that, and then from there move on to the understanding the relationship between those facts and figures that they've memorized, then they can express their understanding of it clearly through the written or spoken word, and it just makes them able to take their education into their own hands and study whatever they want. So that is classical education. Classical education is a method of homeschooling that we can count on, and because it's proven to be effective over years and years. And it wasn't until only recently that we have lost the tools of learning, and now many homeschoolers are taking that back and for themselves, and as well as teaching their children how to learn through the classical model. So it's more of a way of learning as opposed to a style of teaching, if that makes sense. Classical education is very versatile and flexible. It works with any other kind of homeschool style, which makes it so cool in my opinion. I can teach my children the basic fundamentals and help them to memorize certain material, but I can present it to them in a Charlotte Mason style approach to that material. So I have talked about this before, where I'm combining classical and Charlotte Mason styles together. You can watch that in another video. But my point is, you don't have to box yourself into one style. You can take whatever works from each of these different styles and form it into your own. And I think that that is just great that we have the freedom as homeschoolers to do that. So I hope that this video helped you. If you have any questions at all about the classical educational model, be sure and leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. Don't forget to check out the playlist down below, hosted by Davine from Calm in the Chaos. She's worked so hard to put this playlist together and to get all these moms talking about each specific homeschool style. So be sure and watch all the other videos in the link in the description box down below, and I will see you in the next video.